So when mistakes happen, offer yourself the grace to let those small failures happen, because those small failures will teach you how to be successful in your endeavors going forward.
What's going on, everybody? You are now tuned into the smartest guys in the room. It's your boy O.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Big Just.
And we got some special guests today, man. Well, they're always special. We always say this, but this is a really important episode. Past collaborators and family of the show, not even friends of the show. Julianny Gomez and Dante Clark, co-founders of Preshift, New York City, which is a natural wine pop-up that is going to hit some location near you. So be ready. But welcome, Dante and Julie. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
And listen, guys, throughout the course of this episode, you're going to see how these bottles got emptied. Natural wine emptied out in a very natural way. I'm feeling sexy. You know, wine makes you feel sexy. I am feeling sexy. I'm still able to drive.
We were so excited.
Encourage that.
We were so excited we forgot to do our intros. So we just started drinking and chopping it up. But really excited to get into it. And let's see. Let's talk. Good job when we did the event of talking about that. But I think people will be really surprised to know that there's like because you think of like Napa, right? Like the layman who is like listening about wine, they think, oh, Napa or Champagne, like Bordeaux, France, you know, or Chile, right? If you like Argentinian Malbec, but like New York
thinking
wine.
of Long Island.
Yeah, nobody like New Jersey wine. I also heard New Jersey has like really good wine.
Yeah, every single state can produce wine.
I think that
every state can produce wine.
Every state
does.
Wine.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's all good.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's
subjective. Also, there are some climates that can't grow the grapes themselves. So then there's like some people that like, let's say, are making wine in Arizona, but they buy the grapes from somewhere else. It's a whole. Wow. The wine business is wild. It's crazy.
It's expensive. But to your point, Jeff, like, yes, New York, we are big champions of winemaking in New York. Most of these producers are 3 out of the 4 producers are doing work that's exactly like that. Because Emmy Wines and Ashanta Wines specifically, they're based in Northern California, but way above Napa.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They're in like places where folks don't even know wine is being made. Because they're like, for example, Ashanta specifically, they are searching for land to get grapes. And then Emmy, they basically collaborate with nearby organic vineyards that are in Mendocino County. You know what I'm saying? So these are folks who are already doing the work of jumping outside of the shadow of Napa Valley. And that echoes to, like you said, New York specifically. Your Nathan Kendalls of the world, who's producing incredible shit like Cabernet Franc. There's Todd Cavallo from Pine Bush, New York, who's producing some incredible shit as well. Had us here at the event with him too, pouring stuff.
Love Todd.
Yeah, Todd is the homie. There's Barbachette that's making incredible wine from the Finger Lakes, from the Herman J. Weimer estate. And then there is the Herman J. Weimer estate that's been making baller ass Riesling for a long time.
And also, like, to talk about like New York wine, a lot of people don't know that the oldest official winery in this entire country was in the Hudson Valley.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I think it's called like the Brotherhood Winery, something like that. Like open in like either the late 1600s, early 1700s. So the wine culture here, it's old.
It's vibrant.
It is vibrant. I think right now what is happening is that we're having a moment in the public consciousness. I think as folks are being a little bit more aware of sourcing, where their food and beverage is coming from, that we're kind of like hearkening back to these more local traditions.
I think people just want more niche stuff too. Like I think the story of things. I feel like for a long time we went through this lull I'm always thinking like a marketer, right? So I think we went through a lull where we weren't really telling like product stories like the way we know like Apple, for example, to tell these like really interesting stories behind a product. Obviously not the same type of comparison, but like having a background that is more than just kind of, hey, we slapped the label on this and we shipped it out in the case of 24 to like your nearest target. I think more and more people are kind of going back to that and like wanting to be like led in to this like this world of like, oh man, like this art, the way this was made, the way this was like fermented, whatever. Like I think that conversation piece is kind of coming back around now. People care about the story more than any other time.
It's like I feel like our generation is very much against or has woken up to this like, I don't want something that's mass produced.
Right.
You know, like I want something that like feels to your point. It's like if I can go into a store, my local liquor store or wine spot, and I pick up a bottle and I know like they've only made 1,200 of these bottles. Like you're gonna value and appreciate that so much more, and then also understanding the story, like they had a very like the year that they bottled this, they had a very challenging year. You know, like, this happened in that climate in that area. You know, X amount of people were involved in the production of this wine. So now it's like, versus me taking this home and trying to down the entire bottle in about half an hour, I'm actually going to be like, yo, I'm going to savor this. And not only am I going to savor this, but I want to share this with people.
That's the good bottle.
Right. This is the good bottle.
People come over. It's like, no, you don't break open the good bottle.
Exactly. That, and it starts to kind of go into the world where I feel that wine sits very hand in hand with, which is art. You know, like the art in the wine world, they're tied together. They go hand in hand. You go to a really awesome opening, you know, like a little bougie opening, there's always people there that are serving wine or champagne or something like that while you're viewing the art. But like making it an experience that's like, I don't need to be in a gallery, but I still feel like the art is there. Not only in the making of it, but also just like the packaging of it as well, which is beautiful. You know, like this becomes another piece to having your collection or having your home, which is awesome.
In terms of like order for like wine purposes, like the Emmy wines, because it's white, these two are rosés, but because I have to taste this for work every day, I know that this is more of like a savory rosé. I think that this one's going to be a little bit lighter, so natural progression from Emmy to 280 to the Ashanta, and then ending off with our red wine, the Mio Mia from Calce. You see the guest interacting or maybe not interacting with the wine list. You give them a couple of moments, you approach the table, you introduce yourself, you ask the guests if they have any questions. Some guests might be like ready to go, like they know what they want. Some guests might be a little bit more intimidated by the list, or they don't know what they want. So you as a sommelier, your job is to listen and ask a lot of open-ended questions. And then those kind of questions, the guests will start to kind of talk about things that they like to drink. And your job as a sommelier is to start to interpret what they're saying and have that Rolodex of all the wines in your list to narrow it down to that one perfect bottle. You go down to the cellar, you get that bottle, you go to the table, you walk up, you present the bottle to the table, usually to the person that has like made the decision or has done most of the talking. You present, okay, this is a bottle from M Wines, this is a Colombard and Chardonnay blend. I'm gonna go ahead and open this in my station, make sure it's sound. You go to your station, you open up the bottle, you taste it, make sure that there's no flaws in the wine. You go back to the table, you pour a taste for the person that ordered the wine. You wait a second, make sure that they approve. They approve, you go clockwise, and then you pour the wine to everybody that's at the table.
So even from the way you hold the bottle, was that something that was part of your training? Do you call it training? Okay. And then B, is that just like standard kind of like service? Like when you're
Yeah, is it more like wine culture or is it more service culture?
right.
It's both.
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah, I would say it's both. Like specifically for the both of us, yeah, we've been trained to practice this tradition in hospitality settings. Some of which are more wine focused for sure. But to us, this is also the standard when it comes to presenting wine in a place that maybe isn't necessarily known for being wine forward as well. Because it's the most successful means of coming to an understanding with your client and understanding the wine that you're pouring as well too.
Got it. Can I ask, and I know we're jumping around, but you made a really good point earlier about art and like how wine is kind of already broaching that sphere. I wanted to ask because you mentioned about labels being forward, and like it's a very simple question, but like how important are the labels when it comes to this? Because I think that if you're like me that doesn't like, or somebody who doesn't know too much about wine, I think quality of like art and like design does like fills that for you. Yeah, it kind of calls you more than like the taste, because you don't know what you're tasting. You don't know what you're tasting for. So I want to know like how important is that process? Like, do winemakers like really go hard on that, or is it more like an afterthought, or is it depending on the winemaker?
It depends, is the short answer. With a lot more like classic wines, European wines, or even wines from like Napa Valley that have a long tradition, you're not so much going to get like the kind of artwork that you'll see, particularly like in these three wines. You'll get a lot of script. And usually it's supposed to try to get as specific as possible as to where this wine is coming from. You'll see the name of a domain or a chateau. You'll see the appellation that it's coming from, the grapes, with a lot more of like the newer generation of winemakers, some that are not as tied down to generations of tradition. There is a little bit more experimentation on the label. And a lot of these winemakers come from artistic backgrounds.
This is for either one of you. Like now knowing that, right? Like I know that you know what to expect when you see a label. Are there any red flags? Like when you see a label and it maybe doesn't have something, or it does include something like a term or phrase that you're like, all right, like I'm not messing with this, or like maybe skip this.
I love that you just asked that question because I have a follow-up to that, so please.
I don't know how to answer that. Can't remember the last time I saw a red flag. Well, the only red flags to me these days are like if I see
high fructose corn syrup.
No, yeah, exactly. Always. The only red flag really for me is seeing a wine at a shop that has like commercials and shit. Because
what do you mean?
Like ads?
Like
yeah,
ads?
like really famous big agricultural products that are more so about volume over value, in my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? By like, wineries that are established for sure, but are, basically instilling practices that are not beneficial to the land in which they are working on. And also are probably adding all these like artificial things to the bottle in order to preserve their juice in a way that strips it away from its true expression. So yes, there's some very famous wineries out there that, I just kind of like see Snoop Dogg's face and I'm not going to buy it.
Rather not.
You'd rather not. No, but it's less about that and more so about the fact that like my experience with like big agricultural products, like very famous wines of that sort, usually tends to just kind of like be one-dimensional and it tastes the same way because they make it the same way every single time. It's not an expression of terroir or the place that it comes from.
Yeah.
It's more of an expression of this product
standardized.
that needs to be moved, and it moves well for a reason because it's very popular. Did I overstep?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was gonna add to that too. And I'm gonna put red flags in quotes. I think that the more specific to the place that the label kind of like gives you. I think that is more, could be an indication of the quality of the wine. Like, for example, if I go to my local liquor store and, like, let's say there's a wine that has a cool label, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna pick this up, but I turn the label around and it just says wine from California.
Does it specify?
Where is it? Like, where in
Exactly.
California?
That's the type of
okay.
stuff.
So
I mean,
that's telling me that, okay, these grapes are coming from
God knows
anywhere in the state. I don't know if the quality of the grapes were accounted for.
Yeah.
I can't even like search up the places to see like, what are these farms? Are they practicing organic? Are they treating their labor force with the respect and compensating like what it is that they owe? Like, I just have a lot of questions that make me very hesitant to spend my money on that bottle.
I feel you.
That's a fantastic flag though. Like just even understanding the specificity.
I assume
of
like
the
as soon as
location.
you said the grapes, if like now I assume like if the shit don't got the grapes in it, then it's like, all right, what are you trying to hide from me, dog?
What do you mean?
Yeah,
Well-
like it names the grapes. Like in some of the in a lot of the wine bottles, it'll tell you
the type of grape.
Yeah, that it was used because to make a specific. Correct me if I'm wrong. To make a specific type, you need specific types of grapes, right? Like to make, like if you want to make, I don't know, Pinot Noir, like you were mentioning earlier, you would need like a specific type of grape that is for that. So like if I'm buying a Pinot Noir and it don't say like Pinot grapes, you know, like
Pinot grapes.
You don't want them Seatown grapes. You
Yeah,
want-
exactly.
You don't want the Seatown.
Yeah, nah.
You don't want the cotton candy grapes.
You want them real
Aldi
grapes. Yeah.
So, and we could do several of these, but I think it's a nice spot or moment to take a pause and maybe open up a bottle, and y'all could tell us a little bit more about how you got started into this, because like we jump right into it, but we'd love to hear like how y'all got into it.
All right, so let's open the Emmy wines. I think you should open it.
Yeah, I can do that. Do you want to talk about the wine key a little bit?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this wine key is coming from our friend Shitty Wine Memes, who likes to remain anonymous.
Shout out
Shitty
to
Wine
Shitty
Memes,
Wine
is that what it
Memes.
is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shitty Wine
Nice.
Memes. Yeah,
It's
so
a funny ass account.
it is a great funny account, super accessible, just kind of like making like lighthearted jokes about this crazy industry that we work in. The person that is behind the account is very much experienced in this world. And we're lucky enough to call them a friend.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this wine key, they sell on their IG page. So go to @ShittyWineMemes, only $15, and it is an exceptional, high quality key. I work at a fine dining restaurant. I use this key at work every single day.
Wow.
It holds me down.
And what makes it so high quality?
Yeah, so number one, this nifty tool right here. None of these wines have foil on them, but I do deal with a lot of wines that have foil. So the knife itself is like nice and serrated. It has stayed sharp ever since I bought it, like the beginning of this year. I haven't had to sharpen it. Cuts very cleanly.
Wow.
I have also not had to retighten any of the screws for the hinge part that allows me to be able to have a good handle like on the cork as I'm pushing it up. And it just kind of like has a good weight to it. Just feels really good in my
That grade A
hand.
aluminum or whatever it is.
Julie,
Yeah.
QVC is waiting for you, my friend. QVC is
What's
waiting
the
for
difference
you,
between a
son.
corkscrew and a wine key? Because I would have just been like, yo, have me a corkscrew.
Well, I think it's just one part of the wine key.
The corkscrew is the squiggly part,
Yeah.
but then the wine key is the whole
Is
the whole shebang.
apparatus,
Gotcha,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Harold, do you want to catch Dante in his
So another question is, when you approach someone with wine and you do all the steps and you show them the wine and the year and stuff, what happens if someone is like, nah?
That does happen.
That does happen.
like after the taste, and they're
Yeah,
like,
or
nah.
if they're just like, nah, I'm not.
What
I'm
happens
good."
then?
So yeah,
Buy the glass special.
Yeah, no, seriously. Like if it is a bottle, let's buy the bottle. Okay, it's open. We're gonna find a way to sell it. Like it'll, as Dante said, it'll become, one day only BTG, like back pocket sell.
Love that.
okay.
But then no, we just kind of go back to the drawing board. We start asking a lot of questions. Okay, what did you not like about it?
Yeah.
What are other things that you like?
And it
Or
helps you
I
in-
remember you said that you like this thing. Or maybe like I walked past your table and I heard you talking about how like you went to Spain and you loved your trip. And then I'm going to come back upstairs like, oh, I heard that you visited Galicia this year. Here's this wine that I think you might enjoy.
Yeah.
So
ABC.
it's all about going back to square one and
For real.
revisiting my Rolodex.
So yeah, the wine that we're tasting right now, this is a producer that's based out of Northern California, Mendocino County. Her name is Rosalind Reynolds. Her winery is called Emmy Wines. Emmy Wines is named after her grandmother, who actually had a really deep interest in like Napa Valley Chardonnay. They don't necessarily have the same alignment when it comes to their wine palates, but they are in alignment when it comes to agricultural practices that benefit the land that they're working on.
Got it.
So Emmy is a project in which Rosalind Reynolds is making natural wine with organic wineries and vineyards that are sort of like nearby her. They're always collaborations for the most part. And she's also making wine out of another winery in Northern California called Pax Wines too. So she splits her time making wine basically full time for two projects. This is the Amando El Sol 2022 vintage. It's a blend of two different grapes. The first grape being Colombard, about 70% Colombard, and it's 30% Chardonnay.
Nice. Well, cheers, my friends.
Salud.
Cheers.
Is there?
Tink,
So what I kind of want to get into is tradition. Is there a tradition, or was that part of a tradition? Like obviously you pour glass amongst friends, you cheers.
Do it clockwise, the whole...
Is that like is there a tradition there in terms of consuming wine? I guess is my question.
Yeah.
Do you have to drink it a special way? Do you have to like...
A special way?
You know what I mean? Not drinking.
No, but because obviously there are in the tasting, right? So like in the tasting, there is the smell portion. So it's what like you want to kind of wisp it around a little bit within your glass. Like what are those? Like I've seen this, I've seen it before. I don't know what any of that means. Why
I
are
want
you
to
doing
take a crack? Because when you swirl it, that's how you tell how much alcohol's in it, right? Or
You
is
could.
You could. How much it sticks to the
Yeah,
side?
like if it goes on mad slow, it means it has a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, like you could see the legs, right? Depending on how fast or slow, you can somewhat determine if it was a cold climate. It's coming from a cold climate, a warmer climate. Warmer climates mean that the grapes get to ripen more. That means more sugar for the yeast to eat, meaning more alcohol. Then the opposite happens for cold climate wines. But the main reason why we want to swirl the wine in our glass is because we want a little bit of oxygen to come in. We want to aerate the wine, and that's going to start releasing those aromas.
Nice.
So you swirl it around, release the aromas. A little bit harder to do in a glass without a stem. You want to smell it. You start to smell like if it has any primary, secondary, tertiary notes. Because actually I think they say about 70% of taste comes from smell. So like you want to see what you're perceiving first.
Yeah.
Then after you smell, you take a sip. I kind of swirl the wine around in my mouth to get a little bit more air, and also to try to get the wine on like all facets of like my tongue and my taste buds.
Interesting.
I was just talking about this with my girlfriend, like about how when you smack your gums, basically,
you gotta do the French inhale on that.
Yeah, you got. And you taste whole other shit, bro. Like you just start, So
you taste and you
fully
start
buying this right now. Like this shit is
smacking on the inside.
Yeah, you just wash it around and you get like all these different type of flavors and stuff. All right, so take us back, because I've known you guys for over 15 years. Like we pretty much grew up together. Like,
my God.
how did this start? Being like becoming a som. I know that there was like interest in wine. We used to drink a lot of wine and stuff, but then y'all just fell in love with this like kind of simultaneously. Talk about that a little bit.
So I was a bartender for a long time, primarily in the West Village, and wine was a part of that practice, right? But it wasn't necessarily something that I thought too deeply about, because I was more focused on cocktails. I was more focused on steps of service when it came to food and just getting things out in a proper fashion so that we can turn tables, make good tips, and so on and so forth. But I was trained by bartenders who would tell me small things like, and this is how you hold a bottle, and this is how you pour if you're like in a fine dining situation. And things like that were definitely like sewn in like the back of my head. And I thought about it, on a grab and go sort of situation in which working at a place where the wine options were not, I wouldn't say limited, but they were pretty general. And I feel like that was also kind of the culture of the sort of like hospitality ecosystems that I was attached to at the time. So I would go to places and the standard would be, once you look at a wine list, it just says you have Pinot Grigio, you have Sauvignon Blanc, you have Pinot Noir, you have Cabernet. And I was just kind of used to that standard until I started to see things that I wasn't used to seeing. I remember specifically being a bartender and our wine buyer, our beverage buyer, brought in a Falangina from Campania. And I was like, what the fuck is that? That's interesting. That's really cool. It tastes like Pinot Grigio a little bit, but different. What else is out there? And that caused for me to start asking questions. And at the same time, I was already buying wine, but I didn't really necessarily know what I was buying. This was more so to just like visit Julianny back in the New Jersey days, right? But to like see Julianny with their parents, say hello, bring an offering, because, we come from a people who practice hospitality without having to be in the hospitality community. And so we would always drink wine. It would just be like some Côte d'Iron, you know what I mean? It would be like some Pinot Noir from Burgundy. And I think at some point, Julianny and I ran into this sort of like natural wine spectrum where we were like, what's natural wine? And that offered us answers into rabbit holes that we're still sort of falling into. Yeah. That's the sort of like abridged version of, how of my wine genesis, but it really is from being from a bartending background and discovering things that I just wasn't used to seeing. And now I've been tasting as much as I possibly can in order to know more on a continuous basis.
So, okay, so that happened. How long ago was that at this point?
We're talking I was bartending like from like 2012 and then all the way up to like 2020.
Okay.
In the same area. Around 2017 is when we started to intentionally drink what we know now as natural wine. And that's because of wine bars that popped up that became of interest to us. One specifically in Inwood was called Tanat Wine and Cheese. Nice. And they opened up in like 2017, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And by then I can't remember why.
So let me know. Yeah, I could tie into that. Yeah. So yeah, like my wine journey, as I said, the first wine that I thought like was tasty was like Papi, and that was served by like an aunt of mine that was living in the BX at the time. And then I was like, drinking wine with Dante off and on in my 20s. But it wasn't until Tanat opened here in this neighborhood. It was on Broadway between, I want to say Arden and Thayer. Okay. Now it's a really excellent restaurant called Fido that is owned by an Ecuadorian man named Felix, still serving natural wine, but with a South American bent. Anywho, long story short, when it was Tanat, I went in there one day to just kind of like wait for a friend, and they had this one wine by the glass that I ordered because I liked the name. And it was For Heaven's Sake, Don't Move Here. From a production.
I'll drink the fuck out of that.
Yes. And I'm like, oh, that's relatable. And it's from this guy. His production company is called Franchir, based in Oregon. I didn't know until years later that he's actually a gay man as well. Wow. And I knew that on the list it was a Pinot Gris. Now, at the time, I understood that Pinot Gris is a white grape. So I'm expecting a wine that looks like around this color. Mm-hmm. But what was poured into my glass was a pink beverage, like rosé colored. And I'm just like, did y'all give me the right wine? Like, what the fuck is this? And I'm looking at the bottle as it's being poured, and it's cloudy. It's not clear. There's sediment in it. And I'm just like, what's going on? I'm really confused. And then I drink the wine, and I get these floral notes, these earthy tones, herbaceousness, almost like a tea-like character. And I was like, I have never tasted a wine like this before. And I have ADHD, so like all the tabs started opening in my head, like how is this made? Why is it pink? And then I learned, like after going through a rabbit hole, that Pinot Gris is actually a pink-skinned grape. It's not golden or green.
The way we know it.
And this wine was made with skin contact, meaning that like they didn't press the juice out of the grapes right away. Yeah, they crushed the grapes. The solids were still there, so it got some pigmentation from the skin, which is why it was pink and not white.
Got it.
And I was just like, I need to know more. And we started visiting Tanat more frequently, and became really good friends with the owners, Will and Sarah, who were our white couple. But they saw our interests, and they gave us a lot of resources and the space to be able to learn about wine. At the time, I wasn't even in the industry. I was a New York City public school teacher.
I was gonna touch on it because like you were a teacher. You had a brief stint in like tech, and Dante, you come from you were an actor and have been a writer for most of your life and a poet. That like I could see Dante's progression based on everything we've been talking about with art and wine. But Julie, like that must have been a journey and a half, going from like something like teaching that has no kind of element that is similar to wine necessarily. I think the creativity is probably the only aspect. Like
but even beyond that, because as a teacher,
so I was gonna segue into that part, like, but more so in terms of like the hospitality function of it. Like it's not as, I think more you get like the actual educational aspect.
I would argue that's not the case either. Even as like a teacher, there is a hospitality type of, because you have these kids, and you got to make sure that you're making them feel comfortable. You got to make sure that you're making them feel heard.
That's very true.
So like there are transferable skills, absolutely.
And also speaking to novice people mostly, right? Like, because that's not a general.
1000%.
It's kind of like this. You're absolutely right. So
kids don't know nothing.
Yeah.
There are some days so that they were my teachers, honestly. But yeah, no, I do. Particularly now that like I am in a leadership position and in management, I do bring a lot of like the pedagogy that I learned as a teacher to like teach my staff and also to engage with guests. But for me, like that was kind of like having that wine from Franchère was very much an aha moment. And wine for me at the time became a big hobby, but you know, at the time I was very hung up on like having my mother's voice in my head. Like, you got to have a secure job, union job, benefits with security. And I had that. And I can't say that I totally disliked teaching. There were definitely a lot of moments of reward, even though most of the time it was very difficult and time consuming. But I was doing it more for security and survival. And I didn't think that I was allowed, like in the prison in my own head, I didn't think I was allowed to pursue the things that gave me joy, because I didn't think that I would be able to make a career out of it.
100%. Right. I think that resonates with so many people, that not just ourselves, but people that we talk to. Like, it's such a common thread because it gets drilled into you from an early age. Security is everything, especially in a place like New York, where literally like, from 1 week to the next, like you probably got to move out the city, bro. Like, so I think I really can relate to that.
I mean, I think one of the cool things is, though, like as an adult, as we come of age, become adults, we start realizing the amount of unlearning that we need to kind of like do, like that whole idea of being comfortable because you have that security blanket right next to you is like, I think we're all, that's what Jeff was saying, is like we're all kind of trained in this mentality, like get a job, secure your benefits and your insurance and all of that, and get that consistent paycheck. But then with that, nobody tells you that like there's a high probability that you're going to be highly unhappy in doing that thing. Versus like going and approaching that thing that you love, and like and it's not even to say that you love, because you didn't know you were going to like love this as much as you have grown to love it, right? But like understanding that there is a path beyond the standard of what our parents had instilled in us, So like, that's really interesting, and that kind of goes into this thing that I've been very much dying to ask you guys about, is the business of wine. So like there is the one part about this whole thing where it's like connecting with one another, building community and all of that, but then there's the business of wine. The sustainability aspect of it, the financial aspect of it, and like I'll focus on those two just because there's so many different avenues you can kind of go down. But like, how does one? I enjoy wine so much. How do I break into this space and find it to be a profitable angle for me to sustain a lifestyle? Like, was that ever a concern for you guys, or were you just like,
we love this,
and
so that's secondary?
Yeah. Like, how often did that come up? And especially as you guys being a couple, that you guys are together, like finance is obviously a very big piece of being in a relationship, right? So what does the business of wine look like, or how have you turned that business of wine into something that's profitable for your relationship, but also for your business?
Yeah. I will say that when it comes to our pop-up Preshift, the primary focus for that is the passion. It's the enjoyment of the wines that we get to select. It's the enjoyment of the people that we get a chance to work with and the spaces that we are given the opportunity to collaborate with. When it comes to what we do every day for a living, me as a wine sales rep, Julianny as a sommelier in a fine dining establishment, that I think really is more connected to the survival aspect. There are definitely moments in which the passion is prevalent. Yeah, for sure. But then, at the end of the day, numbers need to be made. I think what keeps us engaged is the fact that we continuously run into things that are interesting, projects that are interesting, winemakers that are awesome, and things that we just have never really had before. But, when it comes to any type of business, when it comes to making the check that you have to make and paying these bills in this city, the stress is continuous. And that's just a fact.
I think it's resonant with what's going on because, and let's kind of segue into your mission a little bit. Community is a big thing for us, and everything that we do and the people that we talk to, there is always a kind of a tie back to the community. And I've noticed that in Preshift as well, just about the pillar of one of the pillars that is like inclusivity and making sure that this is accessible to everyone and that everyone feels comfortable in these spaces, right? I think one of the most immediate things people feel is just overwhelmed, right? Like you got 4 different wines up here. They're all different colors. Remember when you took me, we had dinner that one night and you put me onto that wine. I was like, I had literally the same thing as you, Julie. I was like, what is this, Dante? Why are we and and all I had to do was take a sip and I was like, all right, nah, he got me. Like, and I think that this is, that's part of it. So like, can you talk a little bit more about the community aspect of Preshift and like how that plays a role into your kind of your goals for the pop-up?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess like I could tie it into like the origins of Preshift. So when 2020 happened.
It happened already.
It happened. It was lockdown. And I think for a lot of people it was a time to reevaluate what we're doing with our lives. I know like for me that was a big looming question. I was still teaching through the pandemic, through Zoom, and I'm like, okay, if we're gonna die in the next few years,
might as well be having fun.
What is it that I want to do? Because I know that like I knew that I did not want to teach for the rest of my life. And I was kind of like on a trajectory where like I could become admin. And I was like, no, absolutely not. I love wine. at first I was hesitant to get into service because I had seen Dante work service for a decade, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a lot, yeah.
For lack of like,
There's
I'm
no
gonna
way to
just be
sugarcoat
straight
it.
up.
There's no
I'm
way to
not
sugarcoat it.
like.
It's trash.
It can be
It's
bad.
There's
fantastic.
moments of joy and connection, but like particularly like pre and post 2020 in the service, like pre 2020, shit sucked.
Yeah.
And people were treated like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an industry that's really hard on your body. So I was like, oh, I don't know, service.
Yeah.
But there is a restaurant that we really love in Brooklyn called Winona's. And one of their big things, they open up their space on days that they're not open to pop-ups, and mostly food pop-ups. And I'm like, well, what if we had a wine pop-up?
I love that.
You know? And that's the foray to kind of like open up a business and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like, I wanted to have an outlet to do something that I loved while teaching. I didn't really know where Preshift was going to go at first. I just knew that I needed to do something that fulfilled my soul.
Yeah.
And Dante felt the same way as well.
Yeah. So we, worked on developing the
Yes.
concept. Because straight up, the folks who run Winona's, so one of the co-owners, his name is Amir. I've known Amir for like a decade, at least over a decade, because I used to bartend at a place that he used to own in the West Village. I used to bartend at a place around the corner from a place that he used to own called Cafe Condesa. So we were kicking it in the same circles for a minute. And then a few years went by, we hadn't seen each other, lost contact. And Julianny noticed that this place called Winona's was opening up in 2020 via IG. And they were so excited about it. I was like, I don't know what this place is, but cool, whatever is dope. And eventually we went when we started to go back outside a little bit again. And I saw Amir there, and I was like,
It was like the Spider-Man
I
meme,
was
like,
this place that Julianny's been like bragging about for the longest is a spot that's owned by a dude that I go way back with. So we embraced each other, and from there, like, the relationship just continued to grow, actually. Just us as folks who were coming in to eat and dine, and them, being folks who are actually always excited to see us. So that's Amir and Cressida who run that spot.
And then we're going to tie back into that, because then as we're thinking about the ethos, one of the things about wine is like, it is not an industry both on the consumer side and on like the service side that you see a lot of people of color in. It has very much for a very long time been a white exclusive space. And I know that people that look like us, that come from similar backgrounds as us, are interested and can be interested in this product. So it's just like, how do we make a space that is comfortable where people feel like, oh, like I need to hold the glass a certain way, I need to use certain references and language, and feel comfortable to like speak about it, or even comfortable enough to ask questions. Because some people go to restaurants where there's sommeliers and they're so petrified of saying the wrong thing that they won't engage. Yeah, that they won't even engage with the person that's specifically hired to be able to translate this list for you. So that was our ethos.
That was, definitely part of it. And
in us going to Winona's and talking to Amir and Cressida about this, eventually they kind of like called our bluff and was like, y'all been talking about this for a while. We have an opening for a pop-up on this date. We're gonna pencil y'all in. We're like, oh shit.
But I want to bring it back a little bit too, because this brewmaster from Brooklyn Brewery, Garrett Oliver, has this saying that goes, know your saints. So on top of going to Winona's, we started to basically fall in love with our favorite sommeliers in the city. And one of our favorite sommeliers at the time was this person named Raquel, who was working out of Winona's. They now work at Foxface Natural, which is in the East Village. They just got a 3-star review in the New York Times. They're popping.
That's awesome.
And Raquel was just so graceful and cool and approachable when it came to like their stewardship behind the wine program. And they were also just so generous when it came to pouring in knowledge in our direction, that we never felt intimidated at all by folks like them, like folks at Tanat as well, and other places that we used to frequent. So at the time, I also had applied for a program that was a fellowship in Washington, D.C. with this natural wine retail space called Domestique. And Domestique is one of the best like retail spaces in the country. They ship nationally. They're a beacon of natural wine, and they allowed for me to spend a week in DC, which they put a little coin in my pocket and immediately threw me into this like incubator program where I connected with winemakers and wine writers because they knew that I was a writer as well. And when I was out there, I was trying my best to pitch our pop-up, and the pop-up concept worked, but the title at the time was called something else.
Oh, If You Know You Wine?
We called it If You Know You Wine, IYKY dub. A mouthful. But everybody at the time, like they put me in front of marketing execs and all this kind of shit. And they were like, oh, that sounds like a party I would go to. I would rock with that. That's really dope. And so Julianny ended up coming to DC too while I was out there. And it became our fellowship as well.
It sure did, yeah.
And we ended up meeting Sebastian at Primrose. Primrose is a French brasserie in DC. And our homies told us to go there, meet Sebastian, have dinner. And that man immediately was like, do your pop-up here. And we still didn't have, you know, the foundation together for that to happen. So fast forward a few months later, back in New York, we came up with the concept, we sharpened it a bit. And when Amir and Cressida were like, do something here, we were like, well, okay, shit. I guess we're doing something here.
And they showed us the ropes. So I guess like it's a long circular answer to say that like, obviously like we want to prioritize community because of who we are and how we look like, but we would not exist without community.
And I was literally just gonna say that, like you referenced two people who kind of pushed you into greatness. Like they made sure that like you weren't running away from that specific chance or opportunity that you had. You mentioned, you know, the first shot at Winona's, they were like, nah, we signed you up. Like we're holding you to this. And I think it was in a place of love because they believed, right? And similarly at Primrose, like I think you only get that from people who believe in your vision like wholeheartedly. And I think that speaks on the community element more than anything. But that also led me to ask you a couple of questions. Like, one, what do y'all think? And if it's not Preshift, what do you think is the smartest decision that each of you has made? Like, Julie, was it maybe deciding to quit teaching? Dante, was it deciding to pursue this, or what? Did it not even have to do anything with wine and more of a personal choice in life?
That's a hard question.
Yeah. I think it's a two-pronged question because like even when I left teaching, it was also because of community.
Yeah.
Like it was a multi-year thing where it's like, I gotta leave teaching. Where else am I gonna get an equivalent or increase in my salary? Like the job market is hard.
Yeah.
You know, like how am I gonna have insurance? And I had a very good friend of mine that I met in college, shout out Jonathan Johnson, who was like, hey, I work for this tech company. I'm looking for people that were teachers because I have a bunch of graphic designers. I know how to make things look pretty, but they don't know the first thing about training a person. Yeah. Come interview for my company. I was able to get the job, major increase in my salary, and it gave me the time and the space to be able to go around and network a lot more in wine. When that company folded, I'm not going to say why, but they know why. I was like, okay, well, I can now use the skills that I've learned the past year in tech and get another tech gig, or I can lean into this passion 100% and take a chance on myself for the first time. So I think as hard as it has been, I know like online, like we make it look easy. I think leaning into something that I love has been the smartest decision I've made so far.
I hear that. Hell yeah.
Just going back to the community aspect, right? Community is so important, just like your personal growth, the growth of Preshift, and even guiding you to creating Preshift, right? And something that Jeff kind of like touched on earlier was the beautiful thing about your community is the inclusivity of it, the diversity of it, and all of that. Is this, obviously, it's a reflection of who you are, right? Like that your community is a reflection of who you are and the type of people that you want to continue to surround yourself around and the type of people that you want to continue to educate, right? I guess my question is that from a diversity standpoint, do you look specifically for those opportunities to continue to say, I want to educate the community that I come from versus I want to stay in this community that already knows about wine and they just love wine and blah, blah, and I can continue. Like, it's consistent here. Like, this is the easy road. This is the harder road because, like, your friends and family, and this is just an assumption, but, like, your friends and family might not be as well versed into this in this area as, like, some of the folks who you have your day-to-day contacts with. So, like, can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of continuing to educate the community you come from and build more wine connoisseurs, more, wine lovers just based off of like the platform that you guys created?
Yeah, absolutely. That really ties into the genesis of how we got the name Preshift too a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Because the educational factor exists within the genesis of that concept. I was managing a bar in Williamsburg for a bit, and I constantly had to type up the pre-shift before service. It's pre-shift, or you call it lineup as well. But pre-shift, for folks who don't necessarily know, who are not in the hospitality realm, is your daily meeting at the bar or restaurant that you work at before service, in which you discuss changes in the menu, you discuss changes in beverage as well, and then you also discuss like your VIPs who may show up that night, and you and special events and all that kind of stuff, right? But in the process of it, you're opening up new wine that you want to sell for the night by the glass, whether it's a special or whatever, and you educate your staff. You talk about the grape, you talk about the region, you talk about the winemaker, so that everybody has a solid spiel when it comes to the performance of service. So Julianny kept hearing me say, oh, pre-shift I did this, and that pre-shift I did that, and pre-shift was cool, service sucked, whatever. And Julianny one day was just like, let's call it pre-shift. And I was like, oh, yeah,
Ding, ding, ding.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Because for us, it's not just about, having the wine, but it's also about learning about the wine too, without being pushy about it. We really want to slip the medicine in the candy, so to say, by presenting these fun and cool options that'll hopefully help you to learn a little something that you didn't necessarily know beforehand. So with that said, yes, we intentionally try our best to pursue opportunities to educate the folks who are in our community, specifically because just from a borough to borough standpoint, Brooklyn's natural wine scene is very poppin'. Uptown's natural wine scene is almost non-existent. And we feel like, if we exist, if y'all exist, then there are other people out there who want to know more about natural wine, small producers, and how to get their hands on a beverage that we all hopefully covet. So yeah, education and pedagogy was in the foundation of the term from the get-go, because the very practice of a pre-shift is about education.
Okay.
You made a really good point about like Uptown's wine scene. I think I can also emphasize that it's not for a lack of like interest, right? Because we did an event not long ago and we packed this shit out. So I think that there's clearly people who are interested in these types of events and learning more. I think the most powerful thing that y'all do, in my personal opinion, is give a sense of belonging. And I think that with many different things, we kind of broached on this in our first episode with Hector from We Run Uptown, but like there are certain things that are just like for one reason or another, one racial reason or another, they're gate kept, right? Like, and people make you feel like you don't belong in these spaces, or like you're not qualified or like fucking studied enough to be able to like have conversations, or like, yo, you don't need to be a fucking genius to describe what something tastes like to you, right? Like, and I think that y'all are making that very, very clear and palatable, to no pun intended, but like for people. And I think the fact when we set up here, and you know, y'all weren't there, so when we set up here, like the first stop was you guys, right? Like when people walked in, and you guys did such an amazing job of just like breaking the ice and making people feel like, oh, all right, like I don't got to come in here pretending like I know about, you know, the differences between the Pinots and like the whatever. Like I think that part to me was very telling. And with things like this, things like wine, things like they're generally associated with like high society or whatever the fuck, right? Like I think that breaking those or demystifying that kind of stuff is so crucial for our community, because many times it's actually us that created the thing in the first place. Right? So like I think that that's part of it. You know, we see a good example of this is like the polo like fashion style that like you see like the aristocrats wear. That's black fashion, bro. Like that's the early like. So I think that there's so many things like this across mediums, across industry, that we can continue to tell these kinds of stories. I think that is my personal observation about like what Preshift does really well for its guests. I don't know if you...
Honestly, like I feel like there's a lot that I'm still very curious about in regards to just like, and I'm gonna bring it back to tradition, right? And you kind of mentioned it before, like this being an uberly white kind of like industry, right? Just from the get, right? So in your world of, and that being very small, of the BIPOC sommeliers, what is it that you guys do, or what does a sommelier do to differentiate themselves from your Bill and Harry sommeliers? You know what I'm saying? The traditional kind of like white guys who are like very much known for doing this. Like, what are the type of things that people do as BIPOC sommeliers to differentiate themselves, and also just make it even more kind of interesting and fun for those who are novices, just completely? Like, is there something that you guys do a little bit like different or a little bit special comparatively to like anybody else that's a sommelier?
They're just cool.
So, thank you.
It's just like, honestly, like you mentioned Bill and Harry.
Why, thank you. We don't compromise who we are.
Yeah.
I think that's like number one, like first and foremost. And I think that that's why we've been able to build so much awareness with our brand, because we come up, we dress up in the fashions that keep us, that we feel most comfortable in. We're not code switching in our events. We're speaking in layman's terms. We relate to people. We listen to people. And it's not about like proving or showing to people like, hey, we know more than you. It's an invitation to have other people be in the conversation. And also, we're not just offering any wines at our events. We are extremely intentional about who we are highlighting. All the wines that we tend to pick are more of a boutique wine in which either the winemaker is involved with the farming, or if they're not farming themselves because land is very expensive, even leasing it, and they're more of a negociant project, meaning they're buying the grapes, they have a close relationship to the growers, they're touching the wine themselves in the process, and there is an ethos behind it. And I think that there might be other, you know, folks around that are just picking wines for price, but it's deeper to us than that.
In your, and this is me speaking to Julie right now, just out of curiosity, like, what in your upbringing like got you to that point where you're just like, I'm so curious about this one thing that I need to dig, and then once I got the answer, like I need to share it with the world. Like, is there something like within your upbringing that just got you to become that kind of person? Or what's the earliest memory of you doing that?
That's a very good question. I definitely grew up in an environment that was very much a kid needs to be seen and not heard. But I was always a very naturally like curious and inquisitive child. I was very much a nerd and a bookworm. And I think a lot of what struck me, like once I had like an aha moment with wine, is that it tied in a lot of my interests. I was a history and cultural anthropology major. So this ties in the history of these countries, these grapes, the culture of the people in which these grapes are coming from, geography, geology, science. There's a chemistry when it comes to like the production of making these wines. It's one of those products that like really like ticks all the boxes. I think when we really started to get involved in this world, we kind of like stepped in at the right time because there was a major reckoning within the wine world and the service industry, particularly in like thinking beyond just selling wine, but thinking about the laborers, the people that are actually like picking your grapes, thinking about the people that are selling wine on the floor. How are we treating these people? So I think just kind of like all of those things encompassed in one product is what really kind of got me convinced to be a part of this world.
When you think back at that, like think back to that time when you first kind of started that natural curiosity that started kind of sparking. And this is a question that we're constantly just asking to really figure this part out, but like who was that like person? Like who was the smartest person? Who would you consider the smartest person? The person that kind of like helped push you over to the edge or inspired you to go the direction that you decided to go in?
Lee Campbell.
Lee Campbell.
Lee Campbell is this person. She's an if you know person. She is like this beautiful Black woman. I want to say she's in her 50s. But she comes in and she's the most stylish person in the room, and everybody's eyes are going to gravitate towards Lee Campbell. Like, who is this person? We met her when Dante was mentioning he had the Domestique Fellowship in DC that I kind of snuck into.
We met her before that too.
Well, we met her before that too, but we'll get into that later. Long story short, she's one of those people that was like one of the pioneers, like Black sommeliers in New York City at a time where it was very difficult. Like you had to have really thick skin to be in the game. And one of the reasons why natural wine was even a thing here in New York. She knew that we had this pop-up and that I had interest, and she called me up while I was still working in tech. She's like, oh, my friend Fernando has this restaurant in like Bushwick. He's looking for somebody to work. I think it might be worth just having a conversation. I have not worked service at this point beyond like our pop-up Preshift, and I had a conversation with Fernando. I worked part-time as a sommelier as I was still working at my tech gig, and I was just like, oh, this could be really fun. Like, you know, I think I could do this. And I think had she not hit me up and was just like, even if nothing comes out of this, it's just no hurt can come out of having a conversation. And like we always say this to each other all the time. It's because Lee Campbell, it doesn't hurt to have a conversation.
That's a fact.
And I think had she not hit me up, I probably would not be working at Hags today. I might still be in tech. So shout out to Lee Campbell,
Shout out to Lee Campbell.
Always shout out to Lee Campbell.
an icon and a legend.
Dante, same question for
Same
you.
question. Yeah, it's multiple people for sure. Lee Campbell is one of them. I have to say, Jade Marley is a beacon of so many truths, practices that push her community forward, our community forward, and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this shit, spirits, and knowing how to bring it all back to your people. Jade is somebody who, when I met her, she was one of the sales reps that would come to Tanat, Wine and Cheese. When I worked there, I eventually started working at Tanat back in 2020. And Will and Sarah, I didn't know this back then, made sure to have their meetings and tastings with Jade when they knew I was on the schedule because they wanted me to meet her. So they introduced me to her as soon as they possibly could. And we started to build a relationship with her from then. At the time, she was working with an importing group called Eclecticon. And now, fast forward, she's with a company called Zero Bean Selections, where she is the domestic wine portfolio and spirits portfolio manager. That's the company that I work for now.
Amazing.
As a sales rep. Jade is somebody who runs an organization that's a grassroots effort with a bunch of people. Julianny being one of them. I've had some involvement with them too. Some of the people you see, some of the bottles that you see on this table, all these bottles that you see on this table have been affiliated with this organization. It's called ABV, which stands for Anything But Vinifera. And ABV was launched last summer in Brooklyn, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Summer 2022 in Brooklyn. And it was a gathering of winemakers, people who ferment things that are not necessarily grape juice, and so on and so forth, and a community of professionals around that to come through, taste, have panel discussions, and learn about things that are not necessarily always coming from the Vitis vinifera species of vine, which, Vitis vinifera represents all the classic grapes that we basically know about. It's not anything against vinifera, we're with vinifera, but we also want to know how can we basically decolonize the conversation around wine while talking about other species of vines, other types of fruit, and so on and so forth, and practices within the industry on top of that. She founded that in 2022. We had we were not immediately involved directly.
No.
We were there just to taste primarily, but then the second go around for it, which was in Miami, at the beginning of this year, Preshift got a chance to collaborate with another dope pop-up by the name of Co-Fermented. Shout out to our friend Onyx who runs that, where Onyx focused on the food and we focused on the wine. Well, Onyx focused on the food, Julie focused on the wine, and I focused on the poetry aspect, where we had an open mic for everybody who was in the space at this beautiful spot called Paradise Books and Bread down in Miami. And it was one of the most beautiful gatherings that we've ever been a part of, and it had everything to do with not just the cuisine, not just the wine, not just the poetry, but like just this openness to vulnerability in an industry in which we are basically taught to be so stone-faced. You know what I mean? That's a long-winded answer to say that like it's various people who I consider to be the smartest folks who nudged us in this direction, but I gotta give my props always to Jade Marley for really continuously teaching all of us how to organize. Period.
And like being our kind of like wine godmother in a way, because she has looked after all of us in ways that we know and in a lot of ways that we don't.
Big facts. Yeah.
I love that.
For sure.
It's a true measure of like, I agree. I said this on the last episode too. I feel the same way. I think I'm a collection of like people that have been inspiring or like that have kind of helped me. But the last question I wanted to, or one of the last questions, I got a couple. But the last question I wanted to ask you was more tied around advice. I think both incoming and outgoing. First and foremost, like what do you think is some of the most like smartest or most important advice you've received throughout your experience doing pre-shift? And also, like, based on your experience doing pre-shift, what is like the advice you give out to not just anybody who's like looking to participate in your field specifically, but anybody who's looking to like take on an endeavor, if you will, and kind of pursue a dream?
I would say it's also a two-pronged answer, but it's like lean into the unknown and discomfort, but also give yourself grace. There's this perception that anybody who like creates a business or a foundation, an organization, is coming from a background in which perfection is molding the project, and that's never the truth. Perfection does not exist in any sort of realm of business, in any sort of profession whatsoever. Stewardship does exist. Relentless stewardship can exist, but perfection does not. So when mistakes happen, offer yourself the grace to let those small failures happen, because those small failures will teach you how to be successful in your endeavors going forward.
Yes. Fine.
I love that. Julie, what do you think?
Be humble, number one.
That's
There's a lot of things that Dante and I both don't know, and that is completely okay. I think definitely rely on your community and your mentors. Ask a lot of questions. Ask for resources if there's people out there that have the capacity to do so. And this might sound counterintuitive, but don't get so far gone in hustle culture.
Oh man, that's hard.
Talk about it.
Because I know it's a really hard time. I know a lot of us like might feel like we're too, like it's getting real late in the game to be able to accomplish something, but I think that's all in your head. Shout out to my therapist, who let me know that everything is supposed to happen in due time, and everyone's timeline is different. So please practice self-care, give yourself opportunity to rest and experience life, and let things manifest and unfold in the time that it's supposed to happen.
So how do you guys move forward from here, right? How does Preshift as an entity move forward from here, right? What does it look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
pie in the sky.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing is about Preshift is that we are still constantly figuring things out.
Yeah.
Right now, we've established ourselves as a company that does activation. So we build a lot of brand awareness and a really loyal audience through our pop-ups. And not just in bars and restaurants, but in different places. Like we've had the honor of being here with y'all, Mr. Foods. We were at an eyeglass shop downtown. Shout out to crew. I know that for us, the next steps are to also diversify into private events, also use our background in service to offer consultation to businesses, particularly like businesses uptown, because we really see the dining scene exploding uptown and in the Bronx in the next couple of years. I've started to play around with the idea of perhaps opening up a brick and mortar in like a few years from now, because I'm still very green in the industry, and also seeing like my two bosses, Camille and Telly, shout out, open a business from the ground up. It takes up all of your time.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm mentally ready yet, but right now, that's where I see it going in the next few years. But I'm allowing myself the grace to just kind of see where this unfolds.
Absolutely.
I think we've seen this unfold in places that our imaginations didn't even think when we were like first perceiving this as just a pop-up.
That's
Agreed.
awesome. Yeah.
And before we wrap, where can everyone find you? How do if someone wants to figure out wine shit?
Yeah.
How do they get in touch with you?
Well, They can holler at us at Preshift NYC on IG. We have a link tree there with some things you can sign up for, like our newsletter. We also have a link to our email on the IG page. We are very communicative and responsive. So if anybody wanted to ever holler at us, hit us up via IG, link to that email, subscribe to the newsletter, all that good stuff. Also, it would really be remiss of us to not spotlight the bottles on this table real quick, and more than the bottles, the people behind it, right? So I got a chance to talk about Rosalind Reynolds from Emmy Wines, which was the first wine we had. But what are we drinking right now, Julie?
So we're having the Amalgam from the 280 project. This was a project created in 2019 by a Black man of the name of Chris Renfro, who is from San Francisco. And he has a really great story. The 280 project, he basically runs out of a public space in San Francisco bordering Interstate 280 and the Alamany housing projects. It's called Alamany Farms. And he has an apprenticeship program that is done in collaboration with Steve Mathiasen, where he has apprenticeships for people that are historically disenfranchised from the wine industry to be able to have opportunities to learn how to make wine from the vine up, as he calls it. And he actually foraged these grapes in the Bay Area from a historic estate called the Fioli Historic House. And this is made out of 120 different grape varieties that are actually not Vitis vinifera, not European-based grapes, but all native and hybrid grapes to this country. Shout outs to Chris Renfro.
Big shout outs to Chris Renfro.
Doing the real work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also shout outs to Matthew Neese of North American Project, who actually helps Chris with actually providing a press for him to be able to make wines and also label and distribution.
I love this.
And this is, we didn't get a chance to crack it open, but these producers are coming out of Northern California. This is Ashanta Wines. This is their Amanecer 2022 Tempranillo of Rosé, or Rosé of Tempranillo, rather. Chenoa, Ashton Lewis, and Will Basanta are the winemakers. They are a couple based in California. Chenoa is a 5th-generation Oaklander and a 3rd-generation winemaker who, in a few years ago, back in like 2019, discovered that the family land in which their vines are planted was being left to the birds. Like the grapes that were there were just bird fodder. And they wanted to go up there and save what was being what should have been cultivated in order for them to bottle up some wine. So they ran up over there, made some wine, and ever since then they've been bit by the bug. They've been making wine ever since. They bounce around and they forage too, all along like Northern California. I believe they're based out of Sebastopol right now, and also Los Angeles. But these folks do regenerative things in the winemaking process that blow your mind. I remember like there's this one cuvee that they have called the Omija, which was primarily Sauvignon Blanc.
From Los Olivos.
Yes,
Yeah,
and if I'm not
was
mistaken,
wild.
they used like freshly pressed like apple juice from a nearby orchard in order to regenerate the juice so that the fermentation process was live. You know, like in major sort of like commercial winemaking, you just maybe add more sugar or you add commercial yeast. These folks are using the things that are at their disposal from the land in order to make their stuff live.
That's fascinating.
What I love to tell about her story is that I usually tell a lot of these generational winemaker stories about majority European people. Chenoa is a Black woman, with some cuvées being made from the vines that her grandfather planted over 50 years ago. And then last but not least, I got to shout out a very special person, Kathleen Cherry, who's the winemaker of Calce Wine Co. in Vermont. This cuvée is the Mimio Mia, and this is actually a blend of 2 different cuvées or 2 different SKUs, which was the Touch of Noir, made with Frontenac Noir and Marquette, which are hybrid grapes, and then a different cuvée called the Regalia, which was Petite Pearl. and she was at a house party with both of those cuvées being featured, and she was like, what if I mix my 2 wines in a glass and like see what happens, like on some mad scientist shit.
That's fine.
And she like did different ratios, and she was passing glasses to like people to see how they would react, and people's minds were blown.
Yeah.
And that's how this bottle, the Mio Mia, was born.
I'm a little upset. That was one of the 2 that we didn't know. You should have led with that story.
And Julianny worked harvest with Calche wine.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
Right.
Because you were out there.
The apples, the grapes last year, I helped with processing, and this is why it's very important for us to tell these stories, because people forget that wine is an agricultural product, and this is back-breaking labor. Like, I've felt the burn in my body from being there like day to day for just 3 weeks, and these people have to sustain that for an entire year.
That's crazy.
I know that I know we probably got to go, but there's 2 questions. One, they kind of tie along with each other. Number 1, where has wine taken you? Like literally.
Oh.
Very little answer right now. Like, you know, it's taking me to Vermont.
Right.
Never been to Vermont before this. I had no interest in going to Vermont. Miami with ABV. It's taken us to explore the Hudson Valley as well. Shout out to Todd, who's up in the Hudson Valley making wine. There's a lot of other places that we want to go to. We definitely want to visit the Finger Lakes very soon. So like even more upstate in New York, where shout outs to our friends Usonia, who we highlighted at y'all's events. They make wine up there. I'm still holding on, you know, to get some fellowships to be able to visit France. I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to visit Burgundy. I'm trying to visit Champagne.
It's happening.
As much as I love my domestic wines, I still do love my classics as well.
Yeah.
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 We'll wait.
A whole fleet out here.
Sunday.
Right?
Sunday in Dykeman, baby.
Sorry about
Where has wine taken me? Wine has taken me to a place of constant like inquisitiveness. I just want to know where I should be next. Wine has also taken me in a very concrete way to the main job that I have, which is a sales rep under Zevro Vine Selections, which is an importing group that's been bringing in natural wine for about 15 years. I've been a fan of these folks from afar for some years, and I never actually anticipated having the ability and the opportunity to work with them. And, you know, sometimes work can be tough for sure, but I am so grateful for this opportunity to push wine that I actually believe in.
Yeah.
I guess so. The second part of that question is we've been talking a lot about New York wines that come from New York. Also, we've mentioned wines that come from California and all of that other stuff. But it's wine culture is a global thing. Right?
Yeah.
Like, people are drinking wine all over the world.
Yeah.
As Afro-Latinos, are there any wines from certain countries, Latin American countries, or other continents that you guys have come across? You're like, this is incredible. Or, and again, as someone who doesn't know anything about the wine world, do you say, well, you know, wines in certain other regions of the world aren't as developed as they are here? And I can already tell from your response that that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is like, are there wines from other places that are unexpected, like not the Frances of the world, that you're like, people should really get up on this right here?
Yeah.
Cuvée.
Well, you can speak to that.
I don't. Where is it from again?
Keltis is the winery.
I'm telling you, I had dinner with Dante one night. Went to an amazing
Clay,
restaurant at Clay in Harlem, and always a great time. But Dante was like, "Nah, I'm gonna put you on right now," and he ordered this bottle of wine, and bro, we killed that whole bottle. Like, just it was such a different taste. It like it looked different from your like normal wine. It's not purple or like, you know, golden like green. And it was just such a new experience for me. I'm not like really into that stuff, but it paired well with the meal that we had too. Like you did a really good job at like kind of waiting to see what we're gonna eat, and then we're like, all right, I'm gonna get this joint. And I think that all that stuff like lent to the you know, we were just nagging, but like I think that whole experience and you kind of talking about it and like watching you kind of go through like the poetry of it all. Like I think that that's the part that gets, and I hope that y'all pick this up too. Like you guys sound so poetic when you talk about this stuff, and that in itself is a God-given skill, because it's all that. It's not. I don't want to call it sales because it cheapens it, but like you are selling a culture, if you will. You are like introducing to a culture, so you are in fact like the primary ambassadors for wine for whoever you're talking to, right? Like and I think that you guys are really delicate with that, and I just want to commend you for that, because I think it's really fascinating the way that y'all make this so palatable for everyone. Again, it's not something every time I've been around these spaces where it's like wine and shit, I feel like I gotta go change, or like I don't really like, it's not my crowd. But never, like, and I've been to like many pre-shift events, like never have I felt any type of like this. It's probably the place where I want to be the most once you kind of pull up. Like the vibe is right. Dante, you do an excellent job, and I know Julie, but like this is Dante's like hobby with the playlist.
Oh, word,
thanks.
And that's another, and I wish we would have talked about that more, but like I think that the hip hop and like the hip hop, R&B and just black music aspect is such a like fundamental piece of every pop-up that you do. Like the vibe is different. There's like, it's not stuffy, because you've curated not just the wine but the music and like the vibe. And I think that that's part of like, I wish we would have talked about this.
That was a fantastic
Yeah.
reshoot. I wish you would have said that earlier.
It's crazy.
Because listening to Wu-Tang and sipping on wine you've never seen or heard before,
Perfect
like
pairing.
that is a
We
fly.
had in the Vino Social playlist, Dante threw in some Griselda, some like real like OD New York shit, but it went so well. Like it was surprising how like it fit to the whole aesthetic here, and you know we went back and forth about that, what that looked like and what that sounded like, but that part to me, just the attention to detail, it's not just the wine, it's like it's everything else, it's the vibe.
It's a full-on that's the thing, you guys are providing an experience.
Yes.
You're not just providing a service, you're providing a full-on experience. Audio, smell, and taste.
Absolutely.
You know, and you're getting to feel what these bottles feel like too. Like it's a whole. It's an amazing experience, man. I love everything that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
I hope I get to make it out. I haven't made it out to one yet. I get
Next
jealous
week.
every time I see this dude pulls up. But I
First of all, when it comes to that, the music aspect to it, that's
think
us
we were-
for sure, right? But like,
Were we
once
gonna say
again,
the same
know your
thing?
saints, right?
Yes.
Jermaine Stone of
Yes.
Wine and Hip Hop. Jermaine is a black wine professional who comes from the sommelier world, the auction world, the big baller bottle world.
But he's from here.
But he's from
he's
uptown.
a New York City
Wow.
ass dude.
Uptown.
Fire.
You feel me?
And never compromise the
Never.
way that he dresses, the way that he talks and speaks. Has an incredible YouTube series called Tasting Notes from the Streets, where not only has he like just talked to regular everyday people, tasted them on like pairing between chopped cheese and Spätburgunder from Germany, but has gone to these top ass estates in Burgundy,
right? And Bordeaux.
you know, and Bordeaux. So like once again, like we are standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us, who had an even more difficult time breaking those barriers. So as much as like we'll always, you know, collect our flowers, we also have to bring it back to the people that were the originators. So
again,
shout out Jermaine Stone.
Educating the populace about it, like that's amazing, and I think you can see it in the inspiration. But you mentioned something about pairings, and I want, before we go, like, what's the like most surprisingly fire pairing that you've seen between wine and like food, for example?
Oh yeah. Wine and food.
Fire pairing or unexpected?
Yeah,
Unexpected,
unexpectedly fire. Yeah, like
Unexpectedly fire.
like oh shit, this
Combine
is
the
like,
bitch.
This is a slapper.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I would say, oh, you know what? Actually, shit. Yeah, this is common to me, but I don't think it's like super duper common, like from a general standpoint. But
yeah.
pair a good and expressive Chardonnay that's not overwhelmingly oaky, that's not oaky at all, with all your pork.
Pork.
Straight up.
Yes.
Pork and
Pork
Oh,
and Chardonnay.
yes.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Pork and
Not
Chardonnay.
the
Yes.
shit that's like way too oaked. I mean, like from a natural wine producer where the expression of the grape exists in bottle, it pairs so well with pork, all with pernil, with pork tacos, all that shit.
Mm.
Hell yeah, I love that.
I
With the
don't
shits.
have like a very specific answer, but what I will say is that like you can throw away all of those rules that like, oh,
Pairings.
like, yeah, like white wine is only with fish. You can't have white wine with red meat. Like, fuck all of that.
Yeah.
Like, experiment with the wines that you like and the foods that you like. Because everybody's palate is different. That shit is highly subjective. And I think that you yourself will discover surprising pairings.
And to answer your earlier question about regions to tap into, just there are many,
Everywhere.
but we were obsessed with the country of Georgia from 2017 to like 2019. We still are to some extent.
Georgian wine.
But we
yeah.
were drinking Georgian wine nonstop, skin contact, white grapes in amphora, which are these massive clay vessels where Georgians ferment their wine. It comes out as amber in color, but I guess in the States we like to call it orange.
And honestly, like, that's where wine was born.
Yeah,
That's the region
exactly.
where wine was born.
Yeah.
Japan
Mm.
got a poppin' wine scene. I want to shout out the Grape Republic, who's actually making wine from grapes that are indigenous to this country.
Oh wow,
Interesting.
So,
that's fire.
Yeah, well, Dante, I think number one, you actually just like gave the title of this episode inadvertently. Chardonnay and Pernil.
Yeah, I'm dead ass. Yes.
I think that that's like a perfect title for this entire episode. Everything about
For sure.
Chardonnay and Pernil. I love that, man. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you for your
thank
time.
you.
Again. And for all those who made it to the launch event and got to experience Preshift, shout out to you guys. Keep coming back. Go to the next Preshift event. Dante, Julie, thank you so
My
so
pleasure.
much, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Yo,
Appreciate
your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Y'all again. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Smartest Pod and on YouTube, youtube.com/@thesmartestpod. Hit us up, follow us, subscribe. Yo, also sign up to our mailing list. We might give you free shit. Who knows?
Yeah, we might give you one of these salamis and cheese that didn't get eaten on this episode.
Yeah, we were so
We'll mail
busy
it to
talking.
you.
The fucking
But
display.
check out our boards, man. Like these are custom boards that we had made in collaboration with Preshift for our wine pop up here at the Chop House. It was an excellent time. We had amazing food. But yeah, they're available on our shop, which we'll link to.
That's right. These lovely boards are for sale with the charcuterie. So you will get them in a box with the charcuterie already placed on top. And it's fresh, so it's natural, baby. Once again, this is the smartest guys in the room. Thank you guys so much. Preshift, Dante, Julie, thank you again. Appreciate you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Peace.